There, that looks like it's working. Check one. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? It should be working now. I'm getting the impression it's working now. Let me know if you can hear me. Yeah, okay, brilliant. I've got a few yeses. Why is everyone jumped straight to the conclusion that this is going to be an attack on HomeTeam? Because if you think this is going to be a negative critique on my brother HomeTeam history, you've absolutely got me twisted. I don't do unnecessary hate and infighting. I love HomeTeam history. I think it's a fantastic channel. Does he do everything that I do and say everything that I say? No. Does it matter? No. Of course it doesn't matter. HomeTeam history has been around for years. I think it was actually the reason I could never turn around and disrespect HomeTeam history is because he's been doing this since before it was a thing. He was on the first channels that I saw to really make an effort and make a statement to framework and investigate African history. And I always got to respect that, man. I don't expect everyone to have my outlook. In fact, no one has my outlook. I haven't met one person who I 100% agree with across the board. So do we overlap massively? Moderately. But no. This is definitely not going to be a negative diss or kind of like an opportunity to kind of pull down the brother. Not at all. I love the channel. And today, actually, I want to focus on two videos that he's done that I thought were really good. Also, I kind of think they're timely because I've been reacting to that new ancient old kingdom genome study, and he did a reaction to it, and he put it out quite quickly as well. So obviously, respect for that. We also did a reaction to another study, the Takori study. Of a North African, and I'm going to respond to these because I am getting to the stage now where I feel like I've amassed enough understanding, but also enough evidence to do that larger piece that I've been speaking to you guys about for a long time now. And I know I've been saying it for a while, and I think in the back of my mind, it's been one of those things where I think, oh, I'm going to do it eventually. But actually, what's happened is this recent Old Kingdom study they've done has kind of catalyzed everything. And now I feel like I've been thrust into a situation where now's a good time for me to do this larger piece. And this piece is around really understanding how DNA and genetics are being used to rewrite global history, and not in a good way. What you'll find is a lot of researchers, even ones that I would classify as relatively, just kind of in their own view, objective, but I would say objective in the Eurocentric world is going to make you Eurocentric. But there's a lot, what I see is a broad acceptance that genetic studies are seen as the highest authority and the highest arbiter in terms of a true objective understanding of the past. And I actually think the opposite is true. And I'm going to do my best when I do this larger piece of work, which is underway at the moment, to really prove how not only subjective, but how it's being used to reshape history and to reintroduce and even extend well beyond the bounds of historicity very, very Eurocentric ideas. It's really quite unsettling and quite dangerous what they're doing in terms of how a few actors, because it's not like loads and loads of people, but a few actors are using this discipline, which they know. I think the issue is they know a broader part of the academic world, not just the general public, but a broader part of the academic world, don't understand genetics and are also very fearful to question it. And they're aware of that. And they utilize this general lack of understanding of population genetics, and they are making very unacceptable and indefensible claims on near enough every paper they release. And I've got a bit of a timeline, but for me, a good kickoff point for this larger abuse of genetic studies is the Schunemann study, so 2017. I think that's a good first study to attack. And then since then, it's just been a chain of study after study to the point where we've got now. And now the claims that they're making, it's almost like they've built up themselves a database of bullshit. And now they got to the stage now where they're just making completely outrageous claims. And I gave you just a little taster over the past few days as we've been going through the old Kingdom genome study together, the Neuroman study, and you've been seeing how manipulative they've been. Well, it doesn't stop there. In fact, you'll find that that's pretty much the starting point, and or at least one of the starting points, and you'll see how much they contradict themselves between studies, how much they lie, how much they twist outcomes. But the great thing is, and like I said, there's loads of good things, it's opened me up to a whole new world of research that I hadn't been exposed to before. Everything that they're doing, all of this twisting, has been covered in academia. There are studies about it, and there have been protocols that have been set that say you should be doing X, Y, and Z to make sure that you're not presenting biased studies, to make sure that you're not essentially distorting history to your own ends. And they don't do this. And I can prove that these protocols they should be following, they're deliberately ignoring, and they're essentially getting away with as much as they can. They're getting away with as much swag as they can in the hope that the world won't catch up. So anyway, that's a little bit of a preamble. Let's get into this video. So today what we're going to be doing is we'll be looking at two HomeTeam history videos where I think he's done quite a good job. But I think what we'll do is we'll have a little bit of a deep dive, or as much as time permits, into each of these studies that he references. We'll start with the Neuroman study, since we've already covered that. We'll use that as a bit of an opportunity to just kind of like reintroduce ourselves to what's been covered in the study, what kind of conclusions they came to, how they came to those conclusions, and if we're satisfied that they used the correct methodology to get there, if it was consistent, and if it was fair, and if it was objective. And then following that, we'll do the second one, which is a slightly older video he did like a few weeks before, which was based on the Takori North African mummy. And once again, a good video that he's done there, but we'll just use his video as a bit of a framework, and it'll probably be an introduction to many of you to this paper. Many of you probably wouldn't have seen it before, though I know a few of you who are keen in this subject would have seen it before. So that's going to be the kind of plan today. And yeah, I think we'll just do that and we'll kind of see how it goes, So thank you for joining me. There's 87 in the room, 30 likes. So if you can hit the likes up to the number of people who've joined us, that would be awesome. And whilst you're doing that, I'll get the video ready to go. Good evening, everybody. Let me say hello to everyone actually really quickly, and then we'll get going. So hi, Wildflower. Been watching HomeTeam history for a while. Yeah. I like HomeTeam history, Jerome, as well. So thanks for that comment. I think we're quite different. And I'm cool with that, man. I'm cool with that. Like I said, I don't know how many of you have bothered to go over to my Down with the King channel, where I do the long form interviews. Everyone who I interview on that channel is going to have a different perspective of me. But I think the important thing is that we have open, honest conversations and just get out as much information and knowledge to each other as possible, and allow people to formulate their own beliefs. No one wants to be indoctrinated by anyone, Yeah, exactly. Over 10 years. I concur with this, James. He's been this over 10 years. He deserves flowers and a bit of respect. So yeah, he'll get that from me, definitely. Quantum, what's going on? B Campbell, Soup, Khalid, Wesker, Tall God Heru, I Manifesto, Life of Joy, Raleigh, Trigger, Happy 262, Hervé, and the hater Chipuka Makazi. Even you're welcome, man. Welcome to the King's Monologue. Hit that like button. Let's get to watching some Home Team. All right. So let's do a little bit of an advert for Home Team, actually, since we're all here. So Home Team history, a lot of people will or may not be familiar with this channel. Phenomenal channel, been out for a very, very long time. Quickly pause this, go to his videos. I mean, look, that home screen video is 7 years ago. I know I've probably been subscribed to him for nearing a decade, but this is quite a filmography he has here, and he covers a very broad span of different groups. You'll get a really broad look at different topics in ancient history, and in medieval history, and even early modern era. So he does cover a lot of eras, and I just take this from a fellow independent researcher. I don't in any way, shape or form underestimate how much time and effort it takes to be this broad in terms of your knowledge base. So yeah, a lot of respect for Home Team history. But anyway, today's video, or today's live stream, we're going to be covering two videos just because we've kind of been covering them together anyway. So we'll cover this one. They finally found full ancient Egyptian DNA, new evidence. Okay. And then we'll be covering this one, new genetic findings, a prehistoric Libyan woman is rewriting African history. Okay. So there's going to be two videos that we cover. And let's get cracking. He said, yeah, dude, been putting in that work for a long time. Indeed he has. Let's get cracking. All right. Oh.
The history of ancient Kemet has garnered a significant amount of attention for generations.
How's the audio? Did anyone hear that first sentence? Just let me know if the audio played then. If it was silent when I clicked play, then I need to do something. Yes, okay, cool, brilliant. All right, let's get cracking. I'm going to leave it not full screen if that's okay, people. Go away. Okay, let's go.
The history of ancient Kemet has garnered a significant amount of attention for generations. The monomania surrounding this civilization is hard to ignore. Because it's viewed as one of the greatest civilizations in human history, many have been interested in the genetic origins of the people, and in part, we've found some answers. Today, I wanted to speak about one of the most groundbreaking discoveries in the study of ancient Kemet, a whole genome sequence of a man dating back over 4,500 years ago in Old Kingdom Kemet. What up, African world? It's HomeTeam here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. My team and I have been doing our best to include animation and motion graphics in our videos. It takes a lot of effort and resources to do animation, and so with the support of our patrons, we can continue working with PlayWatch, the studio producing these animated videos. This channel cannot continue producing this kind of animated content.
I'm letting the kind of like ad kind of thing play because A, we're watching his video, he deserves it, and B, I'm drinking a cup of tea, so
without your continued Patreon support. Additionally, if you're interested in your own animated content and would like to work with PlayWatch, Their link, along with Patreon's, is in the description box below. Before I begin, per request by you guys, I'll be referring to Egyptian civilization as Ancient Kemet, its indigenous name. I'll still be using the title Egypt occasionally relating to the modern country and what we find in the literature, so please keep that in mind. A recent study published in Nature marks a historic milestone. For the first time, scientists were able to recover nearly a complete genome from a man in ancient Kemet who lived during the period when the pyramids were being built, the Old Kingdom. The man's remains were.
Now, I do find that claim a strange one, and this is where we can talk about the effort that's being made just to make headlines, because surely that was exactly the same claim made with the Schooneman study. I mean, am I incorrect? No, we all know that Schooneman samples were likely foreign, but that wasn't the claim being made when they published that study. The big claim being made was, we finally got full genomes from ancient Egyptians. That was, I mean, correct me if I'm correct, you know, if I've got something twisted here, but wasn't that the exact claim that was being made? You know, so this is what slightly bothers me. Well, slightly bothers me greatly about the deliberate misframing of this study. It's a very, very deliberate misframing, and it's done to get headlines and to get people talking about it like something groundbreaking has been done. So yeah, this is just, yeah, kind of typical of what we think. Obviously, HomeTeam's just obviously relaying what's actually said on the study, which is it's just kind of worth, or quite important to note that. Let's carry on.
Found buried in a sealed pottery vessel in modern-day northern Egypt, and thanks to that unique burial, his DNA was preserved quite well. The researchers discovered that this man's ancestry was a mixture of about 80% North African Neolithic ancestry and about 20% genetic influence from the Eastern Fertile Crescent, essentially ancient Mesopotamia. People from outside the continent migrated and exchanged with North African people. This doesn't really come as a surprise for those who've been studying ancient Kemet for quite some time. The northern parts of Kemet
Now I'm
African
going to go back
Neolithic
here
ancestry.
just to revisit the point that's being made here, because it gives us an opportunity to talk about what we already have discussed regarding this paper, and that's the big headline claim. So maybe we could do this as a little bit of revision between each other. But the claim being made there, the big claim being made there, is that the genome is, let's let it play again,
and about 20% genetic influence from the Eastern Fertile Crescent quite well. The researchers discovered that this man's ancestry was a mixture of about 80% North African Neolithic ancestry and about 20% genetic influence from the Eastern Fertile Crescent.
Okay, so 20% from the Eastern Fertile Crescent and 80% North African Neolithic or Middle Neolithic. Can someone tell me, if you guys can remember? I know we've got a couple over here. Kamji has already jumped in straight away. How did they manage to attain that 80-20 mix? Was it a broad whole genome analysis modeled against massive amounts of individuals from across the world to ensure the most accurate outcome? Or was it by some other means? How did they get this 80-20 mix, which became the main headline for this? And if bonus, if you could talk about or if you could mention the name of the technique they used, or the method they used, I should say. Someone said limited sampling. So I'm just looking for the comments, guys. You know me, when I see it pop up, I'll say, yo, got it. Someone said reporting. Let me see if anyone remembers the name of the method. Distorted process. James said, forgot the name. That's fair. The BS method. That's close. It is acronym, so what is not BS? I'm gonna just put Kamji because he already put the actual correct answer on the screen. Okay, so they used a QPADM to force it. Now, this is where it gets interesting because there's two things that they did. Okay, so we got the QPADM, which we've spoken about quite a lot in the last few live streams. And that is essentially a best fit model. You guys will remember that I gave you a diagram just to really illustrate how it works. And there's no harm. I like visualization. So let me put that diagram on the screen again if I can find it. Let me just pop that diagram on the screen again. Just take 10 seconds to do. Sorry about this. I'm just going to pop it on the screen again so everyone can remember exactly how this works. Go to the last slide. So it's here. So remember this diagram that I showed you guys. Let me just minimize this. Oops, there. So QPADM is essentially, it's a modeling process where an individual will be modeled against reference groups or reference individuals, I should say. Okay. And when they run through it, they'll use best fit analysis to see how much of his genome best matches one versus the other. But the outcome or the output of the QPADM model isn't designed to turn around or to at least discard things that don't match. It has to match everything. So when it doesn't find an exact match, it will do a best fit match. So if you've got a database or at least a model that's entirely made up of, like in this example, Eurasians and Asians here, it doesn't matter what you put in, the output is going to be some kind of mixture of Eurasian and Asian. Okay. Kanari just said Kamji is a cheat code. Yeah, but the output's going to be some kind of Eurasian and Asian. That's what it's going to be. Okay, there's no middle ground. There's no kind of like, oh, we know. No, it will always come out some kind of balance between Eurasian and Asian. And that's what they did here. All they did is they got the genome of a ancient Egyptian, or, you know, we'll call it ancient Egyptian for now, because there is that debate going on about the Nurat site, which predates this this DNA being taken, and that's something that we'll leave for another day. But the point being, let's call him an ancient Egyptian man. They've got this genome of this ancient Egyptian man, and they've modeled him purely against a couple of North Africans, and everyone else was Eurasian. So a couple of North African samples, and everything else within that entire model was Eurasian. Now, I know the argument has also been made as well, so I want to address this argument. The argument has been made, well, they made the decision to exclude all of the African samples based on a principal component analysis test that they run and some admixture clustering. So without me being going into too much detail, because I don't want to kind of like lose people too much here, let me essentially just show you what they'll say they made that decision based on. And I'm going to prove to you that this is a load of BS as well. Okay, so the argument that some people will make, let me just click here, it's going to be the bigger version. All right, I'm gonna drag something else onto the screen for you guys. If you'll let me, there we go. Cool. All right, so the argument that you'll hear made is that, well, look, we ran this principal component analysis, okay, on the left, and we ran another one here, and based on how far or close it clustered with The other groups, we either included them or we didn't. So this was supposed to be the qualifier. Okay. The problem was that, first of all, this principal component analysis test didn't really discard that much, because if you look at principal component 1, okay, which is 4.32%, so that's basically 5%. Remember that it goes, the principal components go down from largest to smallest. So the largest principal component, which is, you know, considerably larger than the next one, you know, 3 to 4 times larger than the next one, it's completely in line with the African samples. So there's Neurat mummy and there's the African samples. They're on the same line. So that means the on principal component 1, they matched. They only diverged on principal component 2. Okay. Now, by the way, all that talk of this being the excuse is BS, because I'm going to show you other studies where principal component analysis was completely discarded. Okay. And then I'll show you other studies where principal component analysis was used primarily as the decision maker. And they'll move the goalpost depending on the kind of outcome that they get. So you're going to see when we look at the Takori, I can never say it properly. Takori, that's it. When we look at the Takori study a little bit later, you're going to see they use a completely different methodology, because the principal component analysis they were doing kept clustering the sample with Black Africans. And they did multiple. I'm talking about probably nearly a dozen. And there's not a single one that clustered it near Eurasians. So they use a different method to create distance between Black Africans and the sample. Because the outcome of these studies, let me say this, if there's one thing that you've got to take from this little diatribe I'm going to right now, the outcome of these studies, all of them I've looked at so far, is designed to create distance between Africans and the Africans they're sampling, the ancient Africans they're sampling. That's what they're trying to do. They want to create as much distance as possible. So you look at a principal component analysis like this and you'd be like, oh my God, look how far the Africans are from Neurat man, not knowing actually the Africans are dead in line on principal component 1. Okay, and they only diverge on principal component 2. And that's a much smaller principal component. But they won't tell you that. They won't raise that in the analysis. They'll just let you look at the graphics and go, oh my God, they're so distant. And these are the kind of things that they do. These analysis that they were conducting here, none of them should have acted for as disqualifiers from them for including the African samples in the QPADM, which is where they drew all of their final conclusions from. This was very, very deliberate attempt. They'll keep testing and keep running different tests until they find the test that creates distance. And when they find a test that creates distance, they'll publish that as their headline. And I'm going to prove that. But anyway, let's carry on watching the video.
Essentially, ancient Mesopotamia. People from outside the continent migrated and exchanged with North African people. This doesn't really come as a surprise for those who've been studying ancient Kemet for quite some time. The northern parts of Kemet was part of a network of...
Now, I just want to disagree with that as well. We don't have any proof. Okay, so let me make this very, very clear. We do not have any proof that even well, first of all, that 20% has got any is related to Mesopotamians, because they've used such a biased QPADM model. We know that already. But on top of that, even if it did come out 20%, quote unquote, the same as Levantines, that's not proof of integration. That's not proof of integration. That's not proof of contact between the two groups. They haven't dated when that component occurred, and they haven't also defined in which direction it occurred in. There could have been a group that looked genetically exactly like what the Levantine people ended up looking like sitting in Africa. In fact, that is probably the most likely scenario for all of these, that all of these groups were Eurasian DNA is a result of several introgressions by different North African groups out of Africa into Eurasia. That is the most logical outcome, but they don't want to paint that narrative. Once again, they use the Eurasian force field methodology. That is, anything that touches the Eurasian continent instantly becomes Eurasian in its origin. So it's, you know, this is what they do to muddy the waters. You know, I agree with that, Wildflower. Lying with data is common. So I just want to kind of like pull out the fact that, yes, the narrative is, oh, well, this proves contact. I'm not even going to give them that. I don't think it proves contact at all. Once again, their QPADM model is entirely flawed. So I'm not going to give them any of that, because what happens is we consistently relent and make concessions, and all that's happening is they're taking more and more of African history and they're distorting history more and more. And if you think this study is bad, wait till we get to the Takori one, because that one's going to spin your head.
Trade, migration, and exchange spanning thousands of miles. Now, according to their analysis, this man was determined to have had a dark skin tone, dark brown eyes, and wavy to curly hair. Now, as exciting as this discovery is, it actually highlights an even bigger gap in our understanding of ancient Kemet, because nearly all of the genetic data we have comes from modern-day northern or central Egypt, a region historically more exposed to foreign contact. And this matters quite a bit, because the DNA of ancient peoples from northern Kemet cannot axiomatically represent all of Kemet in antiquity.
So he's making a really good point here. And the point he's making here is that it's basically regional. And we've heard this argument discussed before. The idea that, you know, what we've seen from studies so far when it comes to taking ancient Egyptian genomes, there is this focus on the northern regions, or the, well, you know, they would argue that Abu Sir al-Malik isn't northern, but it's Middle Egypt. However, we know for a fact it was Middle Egypt that was colonized and not under the control of the natives from at least the second intermediate period onward. So it was a foreign tomb for a large part of his existence. And the argument being made here is that, you know, I can see where he's going. He's essentially saying, you know, you continue to do studies based on groups that have a questionable origin, or where we know there has been, you know, contact, vast amounts of contact, as opposed to, you know, southern Egypt, where perhaps you're going to get a more pure African signal, or a more less, you know, mixed, admixed, you know, tainted genetic, you know, you're going to get you know, genetics that haven't been, you know, so influenced by foreign or outside admixture. And once again, I think that's a good argument to make. But I personally, I like to attack the study at the core of what's happening here. Let's put aside the fact that you're really selective with your, and he's picked up on this, so I'll give him props for that. Let's put aside the fact that they're very selective in the kinds of people that they're running these tests on. Because me personally, irrespective of who they're selecting, I think all of these people were black anyway. So it's like, whatever, pick who you want. You're not going to get what you want. The issue that I have with the way they conduct these studies is that they are manipulating the data once it gets there. And that is the crux of the argument. That is the main issue that we really need to kind of like expose and begin to kind of like peel back the layers of this deception. And eliminate it, carry on.
Ancestry of these African people was not uniform, and this is an important fact to delineate. So why does this matter? One of the principal reasons for sampling the DNA of individuals from ancient Kemet is to understand the mind behind one of the most impressive civilizations in human history. And to get to that answer, we need the data from further south.
So I'm just going to pause it here. I need my window back. Sorry, let me carry on.
Many scholars have asserted that the roots of Kemet's civilization came from what's known in the literature as Upper Egypt and Northern Sudan. Several Egyptologists have affirmed this fact. For reference, Upper Egypt is Southern Egypt today. Egyptologists like Toby Wilkinson, for example, throughout his work, has highlighted the fact that Pharaonic civilization originated in Upper Egypt. Here are some quotes by other scholars highlighting this fact.
And I think this is an important point that he's making here as well. So once again, big up HomeTeam for actually bringing this argument to the fore as well. Because I think this is an important argument to make. Ancient Kemet is founded at source in the south. Okay, I think we compromise somewhat, and that's fine when we say, oh, it was founded in Upper Egypt. Really, what we want to say is it was founded in the south. That's what the evidence seems to suggest. That can, if we look at the Crystal Instant Burma, etc., that actually outside of the bounds of Egypt, when you move in the south, move towards the area called quote unquote Nubia, move into the Sudan region, that's the birthplace of Pharaonic Kemet, and that larger, that what we're talking about as being Upper Egypt, it's extended much further into the south than what perhaps they are, allowing people to discuss or bring into the front. They want to kind of like create these colonial borders and act like that's as far as the south, or as far to the south as the nation has ever gone. And obviously, B. Campbell Supers pointed out very importantly that they flooded that area, and we know they flooded that area for a reason. The cultural continuity between that area that they flooded, that's sitting beneath Lake Nasser at the moment, that area of quote unquote Nubia, or at least that southern region of Kemet that was flooded and destroyed, they knew that held the key to the origins of ancient Egypt, which is why they so aggressively destroyed it in such an obvious manner in our modern era. They did that. So I'm glad that HomeTeam is saying this, put it that way. I think this is important stuff that needs to be said.
At the end of the 4th millennium BC, the Naqada culture developed in Upper Egypt, which, as the most prominent representative of the pre-dynastic age in North Africa, directly laid the foundation of the Egyptian state. The roots of this civilization can be traced back to the reign of King Narmer. Narmer was the ruler of Upper Egypt, a region that was historically distinct from Lower Egypt. Narmer is believed to have conquered Lower Egypt and unified the two regions under his rule, establishing the first dynasty of ancient Egypt. The foundations of the Pharaonic civilization were laid during the Naqada era, 4000 through 3200 BC. Naqada is an archaeological site associated with this culture, and it was located in Upper Egypt, less than 20 miles north of Luxor. Several scholars have pointed toward Upper Egypt or Southern Egypt primarily as the mind behind Kemet's civilization. These statements aren't just speculation, they're grounded in archaeology. The very core of Kemet's civilization unassailably began in the south, including parts of northern Sudan. It was in the south where the first kings of Kemet arose, where the earliest hieroglyphs were carved, and where divine kingship took shape. Scholar Christopher Ehret further delineates some critical aspects of Pharaonic civilization that originated in northern Sudan or Lower Nubia. One key feature of classical Egyptian political culture, often assumed to have begun in Egypt, can be strongly linked to the southern influences of this period. We refer here to Sudanic sacred chiefship, which entailed, in its earliest versions, one especially salient custom: the sending of servants into the afterlife along with the deceased chief. The roots of later Egyptian divine kingship lay in this Sudanic innovation. This gap of genetic data from southern Egypt is well known and unfortunate. Just imagine the insights we could gain about these individuals at the root of Kemet's civilization. Sampling genomes from the South or Upper Egypt is not just an academic exercise, it's absolutely essential. While it is amazing to finally see an old kingdom genome, we should be clear, northern Kemet had influences from the Middle East. The Delta region in the north is literally the only land that connects Africa and the Middle East, and thus, as mentioned previously, it should come as no surprise that ancient peoples outside of Africa utilized it.
So once again, he's making, I think, an important argument to say, hey, look, there was contact. There's literally physical contact between the northern region of ancient Egypt or ancient Kemet and Asia. There's a land bridge essentially. I once again wouldn't personally push that argument, although I think it's a very strong and important point to be made. Because once again, I think they've fudged that relationship. In fact, I'm not going to go as far as to say I think they fudged it. I think the data that we've uncovered proves quite extensively that they fudged it. Now, I want to talk about one more thing that I haven't started speaking with you guys about, but I want to really introduce this concept to you guys because it's really important that we understand this. And this might slightly come from left field for some of you, but I want us to, and this because of the nature of the fact that this is going to be a little bit technical, but stick with me, because just like the QPADM stuff, it seems complex, but if we look into this, you're going to realize what kind of tools and methods they use to get the outcomes that they want to get. So I want to quickly draw your attention to a very specific and important paper. Okay, I'm going to quickly draw your attention to a very specific and important paper. Now, some of you might be familiar with this already, but this is probably one of the most important papers because it outlines some protocols that these studies should be following and are deliberately not following. So just do me a favor, because I know this is a bit stop-starty. Just hit 1 in the chat if you're still with me, because there's 186 people online, nearly 200 people online, and I don't want to lose any one of you before I kind of move on with this. So if you're kind of like, you're with me and I'm not losing you with this stop-starty thing, just let me know. But just hit 1 in the chat, and then I know I'm good. I see some 1s appear, and then when that happens, I'm going to know that I'm good to move on. Okay, fantastic. I can see some 1s appearing now, so we're in a good place. All right, so I want you to just quickly pay attention to this study, because I'm going to read out a few quotes from this study, and they're going to hopefully give you a good idea of the problems. Okay, they're going to give you a good idea of what the problems are with the approach that's being taken. Okay, so this study is called SMP Ascertainment Bias in Population Genetic Analyses, Why It Is Important and How to Correct It. Now, this is a 2013 paper, so this is something that they've been aware of for over a decade. This paper was written before they did the Schunemann study and before they're doing all of these. And this paper not only highlights some glaring problems with the way DNA is being not only collected but analyzed, but it also sets out some very clear protocols as to how you must approach genetic analysis, particularly, let me say this quickly, particularly when you're dealing with African genomes. Okay, particularly when you're dealing with African genomes. Let me read it to you. All right. Summary: whole genome, because this intro really sets the scene, and we'll read a few quotes, but once you read this and I take you through a few bits, it's got to kind of make a lot of sense. So it says whole genome sequencing and SMP genotyping arrays can paint strikingly different pictures of demographic history and natural selection. So let me first of all tell you what the difference is between whole genome sequencing and SOP genotyping arrays. Whole genome sequencing is what they begin with. Okay, this is what they start with. They get a genome and they You know, they sample the DNA, they get the whole genome. However, immediately, what these studies do is they'll run it through SNP genotyping arrays. Now, the SNP genotyping arrays will decide which markers or which parts of the genome are important and which parts are going to be discarded. So it limits the number. Do we have evidence of them using genotyping arrays when it comes to the studies that they've been using? And the answer is yes, they use genotyping arrays in every single one of these studies. So let's just very quickly use the NeuRat study as a case study, because they'll tell you which genotyping array that they use. So I'm just going to quickly pull this onto the screen. Right, and I'm going to scroll down to method, where it should say which genotyping array is used. Oh, do I get sections, main, ancient genome sequencing? Okay, here. So, yep, I'm going to read from here. So just bear with me, guys. I'm going to read from here. 7 segmentum enriched DNA extracts were prepared into single-stranded DNA sequencing libraries, okay, and screened onto an Illumina platform. 5 of these libraries show degradation patterns for ancient DNA. One second, I want to get the one that tells us exactly how many SNPs it actually uses. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down to here because this is the important part. So pay attention, guys. We merged the NeuRat genome with those of blah, 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 and individuals, present-day individuals that were either whole genome sequenced or genotyped on the human origins array, and 805 individuals with either whole genome or 1.2 single nucleotide polymorphism. Okay, so that 1.2 single nucleotide is also called 1200K, or so what they're showing you here is a differentiation, whole genome or 1.2 single nucleotide polymorphism. So when they're talking about any use of sequencing libraries or this single, so this is called the Illumina, I think what they use above. These are all what you would basically call sequencing arrays, okay? And sequencing arrays are by default biased towards Eurocentric data, okay? It's important to note that sequencing arrays are biased towards Eurocentric data, and they give you entirely different outcomes as to when you compare them with the actual whole genome. So let me go back to the slide because I want to read this entire first paragraph because it will start to make more sense. Whole genome sequencing and SNP genotyping arrays can paint strikingly different pictures of demographic history and natural selection. This is because genotyping arrays contain biased sets. Remember, I'm not writing this, guys. I'm not writing this, guys. This is because genotyping arrays contain biased sets of pre-ascertained SNPs. Biased sets of pre-ascertained SNPs. In this short review, we use comparisons between high coverage whole genome sequences of African hunter-gatherers and data from genotyping arrays to highlight how SNP ascertainment bias distorts population genetic inferences. Guys, this gets deep, so I want you to pay attention. Sample sizes and the populations in which SNPs are discovered affect the characteristics of observed variants. We find that SNPs on genotyping arrays tend to be older and present in multiple populations. Okay, so you'll find that they will look at the older. This is really important, guys. I'm going to expand on this a little bit. So these genotyping arrays tend to look at SNPs that are older, but then they tend to make conclusions that suggest that the SNPs are younger. Okay, so they'll look at stuff that happened ages ago. Why is that important? Because it probably happened on the African continent. So they're looking at things that happened on the African continent, and then they'll say, oh, well, this happened recently, and they'll give it to some kind of Eurasian population somewhere. This is what this study says. We find that SNPs on genotyping arrays tend to be older and present in multiple populations. In other words, they'll find SNP present in loads of different populations, but they won't, from what you can see from the way they analyze data, they'll act like these SNPs only present in a few populations. Okay, let me carry on. In addition, genotyping arrays cause allele frequency distributions to be shifted towards intermediate frequency alleles, and estimates of linkage disequilibrium are modified. Since population genetic analyses depend on allele frequencies, it is imperative that researchers are aware of the effects of SNP ascertainment bias. With this in mind, we describe multiple ways to correct for SNP ascertainment bias. Okay, so they're aware of the fact that once you start looking at certain populations, focusing on only where SNP variance occurs within those populations and discarding important data for other populations such as African populations, okay, this is when you get biased outcomes. And every single study from the Schooneman, Takori, Neurat, Mummy, all these whole genome studies, every single one of them utilizes biased Eurocentric SNP arrays and does not mention it. That's the key thing. They utilize these arrays and they don't mention it. Let me give a quick shout out to, oh, I've been missing comments. Excuse me, guys. Thank you very much, by the way. So, D. Griff, thank you very much for your $5. He said the mummification process doesn't destroy DNA, but rain at a crime scene does. That doesn't sound right. Yeah, I think they, in fairness, I think they say that the mummified ones, when I looked at a study, mummified DNA, well, the soft tissue, let me clarify that. Mummified DNA seems to preserve really well, but the soft tissue doesn't preserve the DNA well. They get the best DNA from hard bone, like the tooth and the jaw. That's where they'll get really good, or well, the least contaminated, I should say, DNA from, least damaged DNA. Well, thank you very much for your $5. Thank you very much, Finding Bill and Worry. He said, what's your email, good brother? Got some info to send to help your arguments. Appreciate that. I'll pop it in the chat before the end. James Stewart, thank you very much for your $10. He said, why, if the Sahara is supposed to be phenotypic barrier between Kemet and African interior, then why wouldn't the Sinai, I think it should be Sinai, be a phenotypic barrier between West Asian and Africa? Well, because there's no barrier when they want to claim our history. Very good question, very astute. We know the answer. Thank you very much, James. Crenshaw Grinder says less than 2% of sequence human genomes are from individuals of African ancestry, despite the fact that Africa is the origin of modern humans and contains the most genetic diversity. You guys remember when I had Sasha Enriquez on the channel, soon to be Dr. Sasha Enriquez, the PhD candidate, and she said, you know, we should be collecting multiple times more African DNA. So for every European sample, we should have 5 to 20 African samples if we're going to get a balanced study going on. Instead, what do we have? We have far less. So talking about the outcomes being objective, or the outcomes ever favoring anything close to a true picture of what was going on with ancient DNA, with the way they sample it. And think about that. You could amplify that for ancient times, because think about it. We're now furthest, as far away as we are from the initial out of Africa movements. So you could argue the out of Africa population right now is at its largest point, and it's still at a point where it's multiple times less diverse than Africa. But go back 2,000 years, go back 4,000 years, go back 8,000 years. Africa is going to be several times more diverse than it is even now. So think about the spurious data that they have for the African continent, and they're happy to say, oh, no relation to sub-Saharan African, even when it does occur, but you know, no relation to sub-Saharan African, based on 1 or 2 ancient African samples, when they know they should have for a study like this, they should have at least 50. You know, we all know this is a game that's being stacked out of our favor. And it gets worse when we have a look at this study. Let me quickly pull up a quote, and then I'm going to shoot back and carry on watching HomeTeam's video. But I want to pull up a quote on this paper because it's quite important. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, so let me just quickly, I'm going to find the quote now. Give me a second. Find, where's find? Here we go. Okay, so let me read this quote for you now, guys, because this is probably quite a key quote. I could go through this paper. I've got like 50 quotes from this paper, but let me read this one to you, because this will really put things in perspective, and I'll show you a couple of charts as well. But it says here, because genetic diversity is unequally distributed across populations, we know obviously African populations being significantly more genetic diverse, the populations in which SNPs are discovered contribute to SNP ascertainment bias. So where do you think they're discovering all of their SNPs currently, based on the feedback someone just said about 2% of modern SNPs being African, the other 98% being non-African, and I bet you heavily weighted towards the European continent? I think we know what's going on there. So that means the SNPs that they're locating or they're finding at the moment, are all going to be Eurasian. Let me carry on. For example, human populations from Africa contain greater genetic diversity than populations from Europe, Asia, Oceania, or the Americas. This pattern arises from serial bottlenecks and founder effects. I speak about this a lot, okay? And they're aware of this. Serial bottlenecks and founder effects. Serial means continuous. Bottlenecks and founder effects, as modern humans expanded from Africa to colonize other continents. Even among African populations, the number of SNPs detected can vary substantially. Let's carry on, because this has not even got to the kicker yet. We observed a total of 8.9 million variants in 5 pygmy genomes, 7.3 million variants in 5 Hadza genomes, and 8.2 million variants in 5 Sandawe genomes. When SNPs are ascertained in one population and used to genotype other populations, I'm going to read this again. This is the kind of big, sorry, let me hide that comment on the screen because I want you guys to get this. Let me read this again. When SNPs are ascertained in one population and used to genotype other populations, erroneous conclusions can result. We're not even into that was just the warm-up. Let's get to the kicker here. This is particularly important for SNPs originally discovered in less diverse non-African populations. Can I start reading it again? This is particularly important for SNPs originally discovered in less diverse non-African populations. Like every single SNP, they are doing studies on ancient Africans with now. They were discovered in less diverse Eurasian populations. And this is clearly saying that is a massive problem. For example, when the heterozygosity of variants ascertained in European populations, so it's being specific here, guys. For example, when the heterozygosity of variants ascertained in European populations are assessed, it can falsely lead to the conclusion that European populations harbor a greater amount of variation than African populations, and to miss estimates of effective population sizes. Guys, we are not there yet. Are you reading what I'm reading here? It's very, very specific. It's saying S&P arrays derived from European populations are no good for analyzing Africans. It's being very explicit here. This is being very explicit here, guys. Okay? We shouldn't be using S&P arrays that were derived in European populations to analyze Africans. Okay? We shouldn't be using them. We should be using broader ones that take into account full African genomic diversity. Let's carry on. An additional form of bias is that genotyping arrays are enriched for SNPs in some genomic regions and deficient for SNPs in other genomic regions. For each African hunter-gatherer population, we compared the number of SNPs per 10 kb window from whole genome sequencing and number of SNPs present in the Illumina. So this is one of their SNP genotyping arrays, Illumina 1M duo genotyping array. So 1M is just telling you the number of SNPs it looks like. Remember the one that we looked at in the Neurat study looked at 1.2 million. This one looks at 1 million. So not far off. And it was an Illumina as well. Okay, so they tend to use very similar, or the same companies. As expected, SNP density was much higher for whole genome sequencing. Overall, genomic regions with high numbers of SNPs from whole genome sequencing also had a high number of SNPs on the Illumina 1M duo array. However, not all 100 kb windows are represented equally on the Illumina 1M duo array. Now, this diagram that it shows you, let me just quickly show you this diagram really quickly. It just gives you the idea of the number or the difference in range. So I thought this would open up a high resolution one. It didn't. 1 second. Let me just open the image. New tab. Let me just open this image for you guys quickly. I just want to show you this image really quickly, just on a very, very quick look. So you can see here, this is the ones run through the Illumina, and we're talking about 150K. So 150, 100, so it's 100 KB. So 150K. So 0 to 150K SNPs. If we look at the whole genome, we're talking about 0 to 1.5 million Ks. Okay, so whole genome sequencing is just basically giving you a lot more, like 10 times more, essentially. So you've got 10 times more SNP markers, genomes to look at, or 10 times more in the genome to look at, okay? Far more SNP markers to look at. And a lot of African diversity sits outside of that Eurasian range that they have everybody focused on at the moment. Now, why is this really important? I want to give you guys one more quote. Let me just quickly find it. It's got one more quote I was going to find for you guys. 1 second. Okay, let me just read this quote to you quickly. Measures of population differentiation, such as FST, are also, so FST is what we looked at the other day. This is your output statistics. Okay, when they're measuring with output statistics, they're measuring distance from a subject. Okay, and they basically say if two samples have a similar distance from the subject, so let's say the subject is something like a chimpanzee. Okay, if two subjects have a similar distance, in other words, they show variance in the same genes, and that variance creates distance. So their change in those genes creates distance from this subject, this outgroup subject. Then they'll say, well, these two must be closely related because of their variance distance from this subject. The problem is when you already have a limited SMP genotype and array that is discarded loads of different SMP markers in favor of these ones that it deems are important, you're only getting a very tiny portion of the picture. And this is why it says the following. So it says here, measures of population differentiation, such as FST, are also affected by SMP ascertainment bias. Older SMPs, such as ascertained SMPs, found on genotype and arrays can drift to very different allele frequencies in divergent populations. Furthermore, the magnitude of FST depends on minor allele frequencies in each population. Comparisons between whole genome sequences and SMP array data for African hunter-gatherers reveals that ascertained SMPs tend to have higher values of FST. Okay, so that means the ones they look at. This means that ascertained SMPs will tend to overestimate. This is the important sentence, guys. I know this is quite technical, but just listen to this next sentence because it's really important. This means that ascertained SMPs will tend to overestimate the amount of population differentiation. This is really important, guys, because they're using these output, and you're going to see, you saw that in the Neura study, and you're going to see that in the Takori study. They use these output statistics as a justification to say, when they couldn't get that, when they basically couldn't find any relation when they run principal component analysis, and the Takori mummy kept on clustering with Black Africans, they ran this output study instead, knowing for a fact that it's favorable because of their very narrow SMP array, and they knew that it was going to overestimate the amount of population differentiation and therefore make it look like a cluster closer to Eurasians. But this is a false positive. This study is clearly saying that this is it will overestimate the amount of population differentiation in favor. Okay, so in the favor of Eurasians. Interestingly, structure, which assigns individual ancestry to a finite number of population clusters, is relatively robust to SMP ascertainment bias. They don't use it. This occurs because structure uses large multi-locus databases and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you've got one that's a little bit better, but surprisingly, they don't use it. Okay, they don't use it. So anyway, I've been waffling on for way too long, but I did want to introduce you to this study. This study I'm going to use as the basis for analyzing what has taken place in these recent studies and see how many are following the protocols that have been set in this study, because it really lays bare and makes it very obvious how they've been using these genetic studies to falsify African genetic, the representation of Africans from the ancient world or ancient DNA. And it's important that we kind of have an understanding of that. Let me give a quick shout. I think a couple would have come through. Do the ancient mummies have Neanderthal DNA? Because we haven't seen any, and only Africans have that DNA from Neanderthals. Only Africans don't have that DNA from Neanderthals. So that being said, that means ancient Egyptians are Africans. Well, we know that I think the Takori one, which I'm going to come on to, has trace Neanderthal ancestry, and even the way the Neanderthal ancestry was inferred wasn't the normal way that they find Neanderthal ancestry. So I'm not a geneticist. I'm not going to pretend to be one. I don't know exactly, but I do know that there was some questions about the way they inferred Neanderthal ancestry. But when we're talking about it had Neanderthal ancestry, it was so trace, it was comparable to Africans. And we're talking about 0.15%, so more than 10 times less than the average Eurasian. In other words, so trace that could have been just one ancestor creeping on the come up, and it's tiny. It's a tiny, tiny amount. And even like I said, even the way that it was. And by the way, Takori is not even ancient Egyptian. I think when it came to Nurat Man, from my understanding, does Nurat Man have any Neanderthal ancestry? I need to double check, but they didn't talk about it on the study, the Neanderthal ancestry. So my guess is that he didn't have any. Thank you very much for your 9.99 donations, much appreciated. There have been no Neanderthal DNA found in ancient Egyptians according to the studies. There you go. The only people on the planet without Neanderthal DNA is Africans. That should end the whole argument. Well, that should be the end of the whole argument, because these are very logical things. But this is the thing: they'll try to manipulate DNA outcomes and these genetic studies to falsify and create relationship where none exists. It's mind-boggling, but also genius the way they do it. But if we get to a point where we understand what their actual methods are and how they're doing it, then it ceases to affect us. Because I've got to the point now, it doesn't matter which study I'm looking at, I'm instantly able to identify that's BS. That's BS. You've got no relationship here. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to we were watching the video, weren't we, at some point in this? We're getting to the end now.
Contributing to Northern Kemet's genetic history. The reverse is also to be expected. DNA from Upper Egypt may retain more continuity with the earlier indigenous profile. It is important to note that even Upper Egypt maintained contacts with communities to the north and east, which contributed to shared technologies and ideas. So it'll be important to see the sampling and compare that with the north. Regardless, one has to appreciate this accomplishment, but we should all keep in mind that a more salient analysis, one that truly highlights the mind behind Kemet's culture and civilization, would focus on what the literature calls Upper Egypt, or the South. It would reveal the genetic profile of the people who were at the center of Kemet's rise, the first kings, the early artisans, and the priesthoods that shaped this African culture. Imagine the possibilities if scientists could retrieve high-coverage genomes from Upper Egypt. Those results would be very exciting and absolutely historic. So let's celebrate this breakthrough, but also recognize what it reveals, that the story of ancient Kemet is still incomplete, and the most important chapters may still be waiting, buried in the sands of the South. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, support the HomeTeam on patreon.com.
So that's a brilliant video there. I like the fact that I know where he's coming from here with this video. It's clearly, he knows that the ancient Egyptians is a native Black African population. But also, we also know we're being served with these new papers, and we have to figure out the best way to navigate around communicating these discoveries, because all that's happening is you're seeing all of these channels run away with this narrative that is full of BS, talking about, oh well, this proves Mesopotamian influence and this proves blah 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 and Eurasian this, Eurasian that, and someone even mentioned the paper itself doesn't even, most of the articles don't even mention Africa, which is just bizarre and astounding. But that's what they do, that's what they do. So we, as kind of like creators who understand, and independent researchers who understand what is going on, have to figure out ways of navigating this minefield of lies and misinformation. So yeah, I think that's a great video that he's done there. I'm going to just now skip ahead to the second video, because this one kind of introduces something new. I mean, we've looked at Nurat Man and the Nurat study quite a lot. If you want to get a full breakdown of that, I did a really good video with Camgiverse a couple of live streams ago, and that really breaks down that paper, really kind of like decomposes it, all of the deception, lays it bare, and we have a really good discussion about how they got to where they got to. I want to focus on a different paper today. I want to go to the next one, which is the Takori study. So let me start HomeTeam's video, and once again, really good video, and we'll have a bit of discussion about it.
The populations of ancient North Africa are an enigma. When we look at that region today, just about any phenotype imagined can be discovered there. Though ancient North Africa obviously can't be seen as the same as modern North Africa, an agreeable parallel is its genetic diversity. The African continent is the most genetically diverse continent in the world. I suspect the reason for this is because, according to some scholars, Africa is the birthplace of humanity. Today, let's talk about the exciting new discovery of the Takori women's genome profile of ancient southwestern Libya.
Just to be clear, the paper that he's referring to here, I'll just pull it up, the title of it on the screen, find it, is Ancestral DNA from the Green Sahara Reveals Ancestral North African Lineage. Okay, so this is the name of the paper. If you want to kind of, we're going to be looking at supplementary material, by the way. But this is the name of the paper if you want to have a look at it. Okay, we're going to really dissect the deception on this paper today. We're not going to take too long. Like I said, this live stream won't go for too long, but we'll be able to get. Is my voice too low? My voice low. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, I can see it fading. What's going on there? Sorry, I think my preamp's playing up. Hello, hello. Okay. Turn the gain up. Hello, hello, hello. Gain up. Hello, hello, hello. Is that better? Is that better? That's a bit too loud. Let me lower it. Check one. Check one. Hello, hello. How's that volume there? My preamp's just gone. I've had it for years. Would you believe I've had it for 15 years and I felt like it was on its way out. So I'm now running straight to my sound card. I don't know how that's going to sound. Okay. Hello. Good. Okay. So that's better. All right. So preamp gone. So I was just saying, I've got feedback noise now. Great. Let me put my headphones on. I have no idea how this sounds. Hello. Check one. Hello. 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 Okay. Well, let me know how that goes. I can't run tests on the audio at the moment. Okay, says I'm good. Okay, good. I need to take these headphones off. Okay. This is hope for the best anyway. All right, let's carry on. So I think what I was just saying was the name of the study is there. Ancient DNA from the Green Sahara reveals ancestral North African lineage. And we're going to have a relatively good discussion about this one today. And you're gonna see some stuff.
What up, African world? It's HomeTeam here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. My team and I have been doing our best to include animation and motion graphics in our videos. It takes a lot of effort and resources to do animation. And so, with the support of our patrons, we can continue working with Playwatch, the studio producing these animated videos. This channel cannot
support the brother if you can, if you have the means to. Yeah, let's hope he continues to make good content for the masses.
Not continue producing this kind of animated content without your continued Patreon support. Additionally, if you're interested in your own animated content and would like to work with Playwatch, their link along with Patreons is in the description box below. Archaeologists have uncovered a window into a vibrant Neolithic African past. Takori is an ancient rock shelter in southwestern Libya where researchers found the remains of two ancient North African women from approximately 7,000 years ago. The Takori shelter, first explored in the early 2000s, has revealed a wealth of human remains dating between 10,000 and 5,000 years ago. Among the most striking finds are the skeletal remains of women buried with care and ceremony, offering clues about their lives, diets, and movements across ancient North Africa. A new study in 2024 published in Nature analyzed the genome of these thick individuals in great detail. The researchers discovered that the Takori carried genetic lineage that diverged early from the lineages typically found in Africa below the Sahara.
Now, see, that is one of the claims made. So this kind of idea of early divergence, what you're going to see is that entire claim is built on what I just discussed with you guys. So I know I was waffling a bit in terms of reading back that paper, but it was important to show you because this is the way it works. They use a bias S&P genotyping array, greatly reduce the amount of S&Ps that they focus on. Then they run it through one of their output statistics, okay? Because it's not looking for any of that African diversity that would show recent or near more kind of closer variance that has occurred between African samples. It's just looking at that Eurocentric part. It then exaggerates. Remember, that's exactly what it said. It then exaggerates the distance. So this is how they're able to go, oh, well, you know, it's split from, how can people be in North Africa and split from the rest of Africa 40,000 years ago? As an African, you already know that's BS. We already know that's a load of crap. There's no, there's no African population that stayed on the continent for 40,000 years and didn't intermix with other Black Africans on the continent. Even ones that are relatively sedentary, relatively kind of like, you know, endogamous. 40,000 years, like, are we stupid? Am I born yesterday? That does not exist on the African continent. It's a load of crap, but this is the kind of crap they like to do with their genomic data, which only looks at Eurocentric, and then they can kind of make up any kind of conclusions that they want to. But anyway, let's let it play.
So what does this mean? Simply put, they were part of Africa's indigenous population diversity. According to the Nature article, the Takori genome data shows affinities with other Saharan Africans and Central African Sahelians, but they also carry distinct signatures not fully shared with Africans below the Sahara or populations outside of the continent. This may be challenging for individuals who seek to obstinately subscribe to any particular set of absolute beliefs concerning African history and African people. In other words, the data is showing some complexity. It's difficult to simplify.
So to be clear, I'm calling BS on this. Obviously, he's doing a really good job just kind of relaying what the study says, but I'm calling BS on this, you know, oh, split from, diverged from Africans and remained completely split from them 40,000 years. I'm calling complete BS on it. Let's have a look at the paper itself, okay? And then let's get under the hood of some of this nonsense that they're trying to feed people with. Because actually, when you lay it bare, you realize these people really are the emperor's new clothes. They say what they want on their paper, but even their own data exposes them for being liars, okay? So let's have a look at this. So I just want to read the abstract to you because, you know, they're always going to expose what their paper is all about. So it says here, although it is one of the most, let me zoom in a bit in case any of you want to read along. Although it is one of the most arid regions today, the Sahara Desert was a green savanna during the African humid period, AHP, between 14,500 and 5,000 years before present. Black Africans know that. We're very aware of the Green Sahara. In fact, we are the ones who made the Green Sahara argument when you guys were trying to push your sub-Saharan fallacies on us, okay? That's us who made that argument, okay? With water bodies promoting human occupation and the spread of pastoralism in the Middle Holocene epoch. DNA rarely preserves well in this region. This is another thing that we are very well aware of, okay? And they're aware of the fact that African DNA does not preserve well. This is one of the reasons why they're allowed to make their nonsense claims about African DNA if we don't put them to task. Limiting knowledge of the Sahara's genetic history and demographic past. Here we report ancient genomic data from the Central Sahara obtained from two approximately 7,000-year-old pastoral Neolithic female individuals buried in the Takori rock shelter in southwestern Libya. Now, to be very clear, southwestern Libya, we are essentially talking about the Sahel region. So if you haven't seen this is kind of central Sahara. These people are big, these two were found, okay? So it's even a stretch to, when you see, we're not talking about coastal North Africa here. We're talking about, borderline Central Africans here, all right? Really important to note that. The majority of Takori's individuals and ancestry stems from previously unknown North African genetic lineage that diverged from sub-Saharan African lineages around the same time as present-day humans outside Africa. So you can see the claim that's being made here. It's always people split from Africa. They split from Africans, and then what? They split from Africans, and then what? Just hid in a cave for 40,000 years in Libya. Like, what are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? These people are absolutely bananas. They are nuts. They're absolutely nuts. Let me carry on. And remained isolated throughout most of its existence. And they're doing this all based on that output analysis that I spoke to you guys about earlier. Both Takori individuals are closely related to ancestry first documented in 15,000-year-old foragers from Tafelrat Cave, Morocco. We'll come into that as well, because they changed this person's ancestry. It's very interesting. Associated with the Ibo-Mauritian lithic industry and predating AHP, that's the African humid period. Takori and Ibo-Mauritian associate individuals are equally distantly related to sub-Saharan lineages. Look how they phrase that, guys. I need you guys to look how they phrase this. Takori and Ibo-Mauritian associate individuals are equally distantly related to sub-Saharan lineages. They're not distant from sub-Saharans, as they like to call them. They're not even distant. This is the thing, okay? These people are essentially sub-Saharan. They're close enough to being sub-Saharan. But this is how they phrase this. They're very, very deliberate. Remember I said they always expose themselves in the abstract, okay? They always expose themselves in the abstract, okay? They create these terms, ones that we don't utilize, okay? Sub-Saharan. How can there be a sub-Sahara in the Green Sahara? This is such a simple discussion to have. The fact that they're using the term sub-Saharan in a study that's about the Green Sahara period, where there was no sub-Sahara, everyone just would have been Saharan Africans, shows you how much nonsense, they have in these studies. This is just made up. They can't tell you what actual, what sub-Saharans were doing during this period of time. They can't show you contemporaneous sub-Saharan samples, okay? Because a majority of people who we classify as sub-Saharan were in the Sahara during this period. That's where a majority of Africans were. They would have been in the Green Sahara. That's where it was happening at. And yet they create this fake split that happened 70,000 years ago, and they remain separate based on their biased genotyping arrays. This is what they do, and we're going to expose it as well. Suggesting limited gene flow from sub-Saharan to North Africa. Remember, I've shown, well, we'll look on the map, we'll see how deep into Africa these are, okay, during the African humid period. Why would there be limited gene flow? They're not justifying this, by the way. Remember, they are using genetics to drive this. All other disciplines require a degree of historicity. All of them. Do you understand that? All other disciplines will say, we come to this conclusion, but we're going to base it on this archaeological data and this data and that data and this data. They are making these rubbish claims because you can say whatever the hell you want about Africans and not support it of anything. Oh, well, they split from Africans 70,000 years ago. Based on what? What's the support for that? We don't have any. We're just saying it based on the genetics and suggest limited gene flow from sub-Saharan to Northern African age. But this is nonsense. And you've got to see how nonsense it is. In contrast to Tafelrat individuals, you have half the Neanderthal admixture of non-Africans. Sorry, let me carry on. So that's a full stop. In contrast to Tafarat individuals who have half the Neanderthal admixture of non-Africans, Takori shows 10 times less Neanderthal ancestry than Levantine farmers. Now listen to this, guys. If you think this sentence was bad, yeah, listen to the next one. Takori shows 10 times less Neanderthal ancestry than Levantine farmers, yet significantly more than contemporary sub-Saharan genomes. Can someone tell me, how can you have 10 times less than the Eurasians, Levantine farmers, and still have significantly more than sub-Saharans? Well, it's a simple answer to that, because if sub-Saharans, as they call them, yeah, have zero, anything is significantly more. They could have 100 times less and they'd still say significantly more than sub-Saharan. Listen, the distance exists on one side. If they have 10 times less, that means they're at least 10 times more related to the people you're calling sub-Saharan than they are to Eurasians. That's what that means. Let's just use Neanderthal ancestry as a multiplier. This is loaded language, guys. You can see this. I mean, who would phrase it this way? How can it be significantly more? How can 0.15 in Neanderthal genome be classified as significantly more than zero? These people are cuckoo, okay? Literally cuckoo. Our findings suggest that pastoralism spread through cultural diffusion into a deeply divergent, isolated North African lineage that probably had been widespread in Northern Africa. Once again, this is unsupported as well. African pastoralism, I will 100% hang my hat on the fact that is independent, it is domestic. It is not from outside. They can't prove that. It's proven in the fact that Africans on the continent have always farmed Africa's indigenous species of cattle. Okay, we see no evidence of import of Eurasian cattle, which is what you would need on the on the zoology to make that inference. You'd have to have that evidence, but you don't have any of that evidence. So they just say things and they don't provide any evidence to support what they're saying here. There's no references. Can you see all of these broad sweeping statements they're making about sub-Saharan Africans? They're not providing references for them. They don't need to. They're just making it up as they go along. Let's get under the hood really quickly. Okay, I just want to show you guys some stuff here, because we're not going to do a super in-depth study. I know it feels like we are doing one already, but we're not. I just want to show you guys a few things and show you how badly these people are coping with the reality of what their data said. So this is in the supplementary material. So first of all, just to be clear, I showed you how deep into the Sahara the Takori was found. So you can see that black dot that sits in the center. Okay, so that's deep into the Sahara we're talking about here. Okay, almost borderline, and it's not quite the Sahel, it's still above, so still will be classified as the Maghreb, but still very, very close to the Sahel, to the Sahelian region. Okay, Central Sahara we're talking about here. All right, there's never really been an argument about the race of these people. Okay, there's never been an argument about the race of these people. Let's carry on. I'm not going to read all of this stuff. I just want to show you the data that these guys are dealing with in this study. So let's look at this DNA data that they've made such a big deal about. So this is what I was talking about. This is an example of what they've done in this study. So this diagram shows you the outgroup. This is like a graphic depiction of the outgroup statistics. Okay. And they've used a chimp as the kind of outgroup source. This is a F3 style. I'm not going to try and explain exactly how it works, but basically, long short story is the distance that people, or that the samples show from the subject, which is a chimp, will determine if they share a similar distance, they'll say, well, these groups are more related because they're this distant from the chimpanzee, their distance looks similar. Does that kind of make sense? They're showing distance, or they're showing variance in similar SNPs. So therefore we say they're related. The problem lies in the fact that they do this, but not based on an entire genome. They won't do this using the whole genome. And this is exactly what that other paper I just showed you warned about. So when they do this using a biased SNP array, it inflates and creates relationships based on a very focused piece of the genome, where you might see much more better, variance. I don't know. I'm not a geneticist, but you might see much better correlations, variance correlations in different parts of the genome if you analyze the whole thing. But they don't want to do that. They want to control it because they know that if they use Eurocentric arrays, it's always going to give them roughly what they want. So essentially they use this to argue and say, oh, well, he's distant from their argument is Takori is distant from everybody. Okay, split from, he's not related to us, but he's not related to you either. Let's look how unrelated Takori is to other Africans. So this is the PCA study. So we already know what principal component analysis is. Now bear in mind, guys, yeah, please bear this in mind. Yeah, when they did principal component analysis in the NURAT study, they used that as a justification to leave Africans out of their final QPADM. So it was a qualifier in that study. When they did principal component analysis in the Schunemann study, that is what they used to define the mummy's ancestry and say, this is what they are. So based on how they clustered, yeah, in the Schunemann study, it was principal component analysis. That's what they used. That was their main tool to say these mummies are related to modern Egyptians. It was principal component analysis. Now in this study, just to make this as quick and as easy for you, this is where the Takori is sitting. Okay, you can see here in the middle of the screen. At the bottom of the screen here, you have a bunch of African groups. West, Southwest, Kenyan. At the top here, we have a bunch of East African groups. So you can see that the Takori individuals are sitting right between West Africans and East Africans. Up here, very distant, yeah, very distant, we are, let's have a look, let's get this right. We've got Levant and Levant Neolithic. It's up here, and what's this? We've got some Moroccans up there as well. Okay, so basically up here is where we have all of our kind of couple of North Africans, but our Eurasians. Takori is clearly sitting in between East Africans and West Africans. Clear for everybody to see. Okay, some very close clusters with Kenyans, which is an ongoing theme, by the way. Kenyan pastoralist here. So there's very close clusters with Kenyans, but you can see sitting between West African and East African. Oh no, that's no good. Let's run another one. Okay, so we'll just see here. And let's read this. Okay, so the plot includes 95% confidence interval ellipses from data. It's really funny because if you actually read it, when they analyze this, they say Takori individual sits in between West Africans and Eurasians. They don't even mention the East Africans. They say he sits between West Africans and Eurasians, but he's a little bit closer to West Africans. I'm like, he doesn't sit anywhere near Eurasians. He's sitting between East Africans and West Africans. That's where these individuals are sitting between. Let's move on because we've got a few of these to get through. Let's look at another one. So here's another one. There's our Takori individual here in black. You probably can just about see it in the center. Let me zoom in. Okay. So there's our Takori individual in the center, this black square. Okay. Let's once again see what these groups are surrounding Takori individual are. Okay, so we have, let's look at the blue triangle. So it's kind of hard sometimes to find these. Let's look at the red circle. That'll be easy enough to find. We have Fulani. By the way, that's another trait as well. We have some Fulani groups sitting there, some Fulani in the crosses there. That's a Fulani as well. So a lot of Fulani surrounding on both sides. And then I think we have a lot of Kenyan as well, if I remember correctly. Yes, so all of these diamond shapes here, these are all Maasai. Okay, so we have a lot of Maasai surrounding. We've got some, what are these crosses here? Kikuyu. So we're having, can we see that theme? That theme is continuing. Yeah, that theme continuing where the Takori individual is clustering with Kenyans and Fulanis. We're having that West African, Central East African theme continuing. Okay, this is on their PCA study. And once again, what are these groups that are sitting up here in the top, these outlier groups? Well, we have Iranian, we have Iraq, we have, trying to get this right, what is that color? Sorry, this color matching can be very difficult. It's not the best. We have even, yeah, modern Egyptian, Algerian. So basically, all of these are your North African / Eurasian people sitting outside, outliers, and then we have Takori sitting in between, once again, East African and West African, sitting right in between. Let's carry on. And by the way, just to be clear, principal component 1, okay, is 8.53%. So that's your y-axis, your up and down. So that's your most important one. Your left and right one, PCI 2, is not that important. It's only 0.53. So PCI 1 is your important one. So once again, on PCI 1, there's a clear gradient between East is sitting right in the middle of Africa, which surprisingly is where it's situated, right in the middle of Africa. Okay, you know, that's kind of what, let's move on. Do we get any more that are saying similar things? I want to get the what they say in terms of when they analyze this, because it did make me laugh when I read it. Let's see if I can find the quote. It might be on the study itself. Let's move on. Okay, should we do another one? So here's another one, another PCA analysis that they've conducted here. Okay, so here's Takori, the 2 black squares, okay, in the center. 2 black squares, and let's see which groups, once again, is it clustering with. Once again, we have Fulani, literally right on top, Fulani A, Fulani B. Let's have a look at, see what some of these purple ones are, purple diamonds, Maasai, okay. See what those crosses are, Kikuyu. So we're getting that theme, once again, that theme in terms of who it's clustering with. Let's once again look at who these most distant groups are, the ones that aren't really clustering. Okay, once again, we got Yemeni. Okay, we've got Saudi. Essentially, we've got the same groups clustering, which is Kenyan, Fulani. This is repeated now. This is the 3rd one we're looking at. Kenyan, Fulani is kind of sitting in the middle of Africa, several African groups clustering very tightly. Now, remember what I said to you before, when we looked at those other studies, the principal component analysis was full justification when it came to the Schunemann study. That if this was the Schunemann study and if this was the outcome, this would have been the end of their analysis. We've run it through and it clusters with Fulani, you had a clear Fulani admixture, etc., etc., etc. Okay, that's what they would have come out with. And bear in mind, this is even running this through their biased S&P algorithm. Okay, so even through their biased S&P algorithm, it's still clustering very closely with Kenyans, Fulani, Maasai, very, very closely. And that's on 3 different PCA analysis, come back with the same thing. Here's a 4th if you haven't had enough yet. So here's another one, a 4th analysis. Same things. Let's look at the same groups coming. Fulani A, Fulani B, clustering closely. We've got that same cross, which I believe is Kikuyu. Okay, we're seeing, so this is now the 4th PCA analysis. that's given us the same feedback. The same groups are distant. Okay, clustering very tightly with Africans, very distantly with essentially coastal and non-African groups. Okay, very, very clear what's going on here. You'd think that would be enough. Let's see another one, another PCA analysis here. Here's our Takori individuals. Who are they clustering with? Once again, Fulani, Fulani A. Okay, you can see they're clustering very, very tightly with Fulani here. Who are these purple triangles? Let's have a look. Purple triangle is, I think this is that Agor? And we have a diamond there. We have Maasai. Once again, it's the same groups over and over again who are clustering very tightly with our Takori individuals. Okay. It's the same group that are clustering very tightly. Now you can imagine if this was one way versus the other, okay, what the conclusions they would come up with based on this. Did you read, by the way, guys, this is what, five PCAs that I've looked at the moment, yeah, all saying the same thing. When we read the opening abstract to this study, did anyone read anything about this tight clustering with Fulani and Kenyans in the PCA analysis? In the principal component, did you get any of them equally distant? Okay, they said they said Taforat and Takori are equally distant from sub-Saharans. That doesn't look that distant to me. So the question is, where did they create this distance? Here's another one, guy. I mean, I could keep doing this, guys. Let me just spoiler alert you. This is saying the same thing that all the other ones said. This is, I think, the 6th PCA study. And once again, we're going to have East Africans here, West Africans here. Okay, Takori in the middle, clustering relatively tightly, and Kikuyu overlapping. Okay, we're getting the same outcomes on all of these PCA analysis. I don't think they've probably ever run that many PCA tests before. Here's another one. They're going to say the same thing, guys. Once again, you can see already the circles and the crosses for the Fulani A, Fulani B. The line purple. This time we got some overlap with Chad groups, which makes sense. So we got some strong overlap with Chad groups in this one. Groups from Chad. Basically, you can see he's clustering right on top of Africans every single time. Every single time. They run multiple. Guys, look how many PCA analyses they've run. It's almost like they were trying to get a different outcome each time, increasing, putting in Southern Europeans, all these different groups. Nothing is given them. This is where the Europeans consistently cluster outside, okay, and the Africans consistently cluster within the same group. Takori consistently sits within a very clear African group. I want to get to the end of it, so we'll get to the end of it, and then essentially they didn't get what they wanted. That's the bottom line. They didn't get what they wanted from those PCA analysis. Okay, they didn't get what they looked for. So what they did is they decided they were going to create distance using this method that I just spoke about. So they utilized this outgroup method to suggest, well, there's huge distance between everybody and the Takori mummy. That's what they did. Okay, so these outgroup. So here's the thing. When it came to the analysis of this study in particular, they focused entirely on output statistics. This is the only study where they focus on output statistics. No other study have they focused on output statistics before. They always normally use PCA for either the final conclusion, or they'll use it as a precursor to the final conclusion, as they did in the Newman study. The Newman study did not use outgroup statistics for its final conclusion. The Schuneman study did not use outgroup statistics for its final conclusion. They had to use outgroup statistics because it's the only one that even put Eurasians in the picture. It's the only output that put Eurasians in the picture where they could say, oh, well, yeah, well, it's divergent. This is why they've created this whole storyline behind Takori being divergent from everyone and being some ghost North African population. It's a load of BS. They know they've got a biased SNP array, which will create false. But let's once again just review back what that study says. Okay. What's going on? Sorry. Let's review back what that study says, because I think this the study that I showed you guys earlier is really key here. Let me just pull up the quote for you. I've got the quote saved, so I'll just read the quote here. I've come find on the study. Well, you guys saw the study earlier, but I'm just going to pull a quote from that study quickly. Okay. Let's see what it says about FST. So measures of population differentiation, such as FST, so that's the output that they relied on there, yeah, are also affected by SNP ascertainment bias. Older SNPs, such as ascertained SNPs found on genotyping arrays, can drift to very different allele frequencies in divergent populations. Furthermore, the magnitude of FST depends on minor allele frequencies in each population. Comparisons between whole genome sequences and SNP data for African hunter-gatherers reveals that ascertained SNPs tend to have higher values of FST. So it's been very, very clear, very clear that the biased SNP data is going to increase the values shown on the output statistics. Did they mention that in their study? Spoiler alert, no, they didn't. They just posted that. Did they say, oh, based on this, we're going to give primacy to the PCA analysis? Most people don't even know about those, was it 8 or something? Principal component analysis that I just showed you, having Takori clearly clustering with Fulani and Kenyans and Maasai and Chad. How many people do you think are aware of those principal component analysis? Most people aren't, and they're aware of the fact that very few people are going to open up supplementary data, and that's why they hide it in there, because they're trying to sell a lie to people. Let's look at what some of the recommendations made on this study are, because this is important. This is the protocols that they advised people to follow. It said it's important that published studies describe any ascertainment schemes used to generate data, which they kind of do. Okay, they say we used this, whatever, they do that. Because whole genome sequencing reduces the amount of ascertainment bias, we encourage researchers to use high coverage sequencing data whenever it is feasible. Well, they're not. They're not. They're clearly not using the whole genome, even when it's available. Regardless of the genotyping platform used, it's important to correct. This is the important part, guys. It's important to correct for ascertainment bias. So where you know ascertainment bias is going to occur, you should have corrections in place as a part of your study. Let's put some corrections in place as a part of our study. We know that we're going to do an output statistics here, and our biased SNP data is going to increase the distance. So in order to correct this, we're going to create this multiplier. We're going to make sure we do this for the African genomes, except some kind of contingency. I'm not a flipping geneticist. I have no idea. But the point being, have some kind of plan in place for correcting. They don't even address it. They don't even address it. They are essentially lying to people using this data. It says here, either by modifying raw data or incorporating ascertainment bias into theoretical models of population genetics. They also do not do this. Okay, so it's very, very clear what the agenda is when they do these kinds of studies. It's very clear what the agenda is. They're not out to get an honest outlook. Okay, they're out here to deceive people. Blimey, that's annoying. Sorry, they're out here to deceive people, and that's basically what they're looking for. All right. On that note, let's finish watching this video now.
By ancient North African history into a this or that. However, those in the African diaspora are often confronted with narratives that phenotypes typical of Africans below the Sahara were not indigenous to the North, as if the Sahara was some natural barrier of that particular phenotype. This simply wasn't the case. To demonstrate this,
Very important. The Sahara was not a barrier, particularly during the Green Sahara. Now, the Sahara has never been, wow, let me correct that. The Sahara is a barrier, and the Sahara has always been a barrier for light-skinned groups. Okay, so let me make that clear. I refer to modern North Africans as Northern Coastal Africans. Okay, that's not me being insulting. That's me telling the hard fact. Northern Coastal Africans, Africans who are restricted to the coastal regions because they cannot survive the climate of the Sahara. Africans, dark-skinned Africans, have never had any kind of geographic limitation set by the Sahara, green or not. And this is why, if you look at those kind of like phenotype maps that show different skin tones, this is why the northern part of Africa is light skinned, because that's as far as they could get. It's not because black people didn't venture upwards. That's them doing history in reverse, like they always do. So the only people that the Sahara has ever been a barrier for are those people who don't possess the melanin content to be able to withstand those kinds of climates. Let me read out a few comments, sorry, a few donations, because I have been missing these. I think from here, Nerd Large, thank you very much for your $5. He said the authors of the study downplayed the Fulani were the closest contemporary populations to the Takori women, according to their own analysis. Absolutely, and we've just been through that. So I didn't see that comment, but I'm sure you enjoyed that little PCA breakdown. What was it? 878 PCA, and that's showing Fulani clearly clustering, Kikuyu, Kenyan clearly clustering right on top, overlapping in most of those studies. If that had been the other way around, if that had been the Schunemann study, that would have been gain, set, and match. That would have been a wrap. That would have been the end of the analysis. But when it comes to Africans, oh no, it's not good enough. We need to do something to create distance. Harwin, $2 says, Kamba people, thank you very much, are pastoralist, consistent Bantu theme. I'll need to look into that. Thank you very much for your donation. They're much appreciated, and thank you for sharing. And Rod M says, keep in mind, since 300,000 BC, there's been 15 different African humid periods. In each period, we migrated both inside and outside of Africa. I'm matching these migrations as we speak. That's amazing. And that's exactly what we need, because the false version of history that they are telling through DNA, this is my biggest gripe. Everybody in the academic field is accepting DNA as though it's this magic practice, and they don't realize these people are literally just lying. They're literally just lying. There are cyclical events of Africans leaving Africa to go to different parts. It's cyclical. These are cyclical introgressions into the Eurasian continent. This is how we carried our massively varied genetic diversity into Europe. This is how it happened into Asia, into these different parts of the world, various introgressions, and we need to track these. And this entire pseudoscience of genetics, so that's what it is. It's a pseudoscience, needs to be checked. We need to check it. We need to bring it under some kind of controls, because these people are making up history, and basically they're making up history, and then they're using genetics to justify the history that they've made up. And when they don't, as you've just seen with this study, when they don't get the data that they want, they'll keep testing until they get a story that works for them. They'll keep doing it. They'll keep moving the goalposts until they find a story that works for them. Thank you very much, Rod, for your donation. Boom, boom, boom. Let's carry on.
Point, consider the famous so-called Black Mummy, found in southwestern Libya, another Saharan site not too far from the Takori women. This child mummy, dated to roughly 5,000 years ago, was naturally mummified by the dry desert air. Researchers suggest the child likely belonged to a dark-skinned population with clear phenotypical affinities to Africans below the Sahara. This finding illustrates that those phenotypical features deemed sub-Saharan were likely common throughout ancient North Africa. Some researchers point to Neolithic cave paintings in the Central Sahara that depict people with dark skin tones, hairstyles resembling tightly curled hair, and distinct cultural attire.
This is a really good point, and I love the fact that he raised the Saharan cave art, because these are the aspects of research that add historicity. This is what we normally look for when people are making conclusions about groups of people. Any other discipline can't just rely on its own, is not self-approving, it's not self-regulating. So if you get a linguist, he can't just come and go, oh, well, I've decided this is how it went. And these people just basically, he has to get the archaeological support. He has to get the anthropological support. All these other disciplines are looking at the full suite of historiography in order to build a picture. Other than these geneticists, they will contradict everything that already exists, create a new thing, and then everyone will go, oh, genetics rewrites the history of Egypt. No, it doesn't. You can't suddenly just infer Mesopotamian influence when we haven't been able to find any historical evidence of it. We haven't found the historical evidence. You can't infer it based on this false application of QPADM. This is the emperor's new clothes. This is the falseness of what they're doing. So I love the fact that he raised this. This is a really good point by HomeTeam here.
While these images don't depict the Takori women directly, they reflect the phenotypes of populations living in broadly the same region and period. Caution should be considered, however, because cave art can be interpretive, and pigmentation is not necessarily always literal. However, most archaeologists seem to agree that dark skin would have been common in that region and time period. For those of us in the African diaspora, this is a self-evident reality. Many in our community have grown wary of the excessive parsimony when it comes to Black African contribution to ancient North African history.
So, and this point here, I'll pause for all of those people who are perhaps trying to throw jibes at HomeTeam history as though like he's about his business. This is why I rate him. He might take a different approach to me, but he knows what time it is. He's not in any way on the fence about who this individual is. He's making it very clear, and he's providing very clear and cogent evidence to say, look, you can say what you want about the genetics. This is a Black person, okay, surrounded by Black African culture. We know phenotypically, look at the skull. You saw what the skull like. It's like so African, it's ridiculous. There's not a discussion to be had here. Trying to create distance and ghost populations and this, that, and the other, and claim they didn't interbreed with anybody else. Like, it's just crap. It's a load of crap, and this isn't supported. They don't support it. There's nothing historical to support. You can't just create populations of endogamous people in Southwest Libya. What support do you have for such an assertion? Do we have any evidence that Southwest Libya at that point in time was an isolated region? Any evidence whatsoever? No, you don't. You're just making crap up. Oh, somehow they kept all the other sub-Saharans out. That's basically what they're saying. All the Blacks. They kept all the Blacks out. They found a little cave and they kept all the Blacks out for 70,000 years. Man, do one, Kraus. Do one, seriously. These guys are idiots. Seriously, I get angry when I think about the kind of implications of the stuff that they say. I can't sit here and be like, oh, I'm okay. No, it actually really vexes me, the crap they come up with.
Genetic diversity in Africa is a fact, and it gives the continent its salience. This new discovery of the Takori women represents this fact quite well. Studies consistently show that African populations have more genetic variation between them than populations on other continents.
That's a very good point. I want to give a quick shout out to Surfactant. 20 years ago, they swore the Sahara was a desert for millions of years, and the local tribes are making up stories. They know nothing, Jon Snow. Love the Game of Thrones reference. This is a fact. At the end of the day, like I said, this whole Green Sahara thing that they all jump on now, they all jump on it now because, oh, younger dryas, this, that, and the other. These are all buzzwords. Africans been telling the people this, yeah? This is what, quote unquote, Afrocentric researchers uncovered, yeah? They were the ones who talked about the Green Sahara. They were the first ones to talk about the Green Sahara and the flowering of the early civilizations that went on to populate the rest of Africa. And now they're trying to come and claim Green Sahara as some kind of accomplishment of their research. And on top of that, then try to isolate the populations of the Green Sahara. Like, are you freaking kidding me? These people are frustrating and pee me off. Thank you very much for your $5 donation. Surfactant, you're much appreciated. Harwin as well says here, and how Kamba are related to Kikuyu in Kenya. Oh, thank you for that. Okay, brilliant. So that's related to your other comment. We said Kamba people are pastoralists, consistent Bantu theme. Yes. Okay, I get you. I get your comment now. So there's a consistent Bantu theme going. Well, I guess Fulani's not really a Bantu theme, but I get your point. There's definitely a consistent theme going on there. You guys know, a lot of those people in that region, we suggest a migration, recent migration, perhaps down the Nile Valley. So it makes a lot of sense to us as Black researchers why those Kenyans were clustering, why those Maasai were clustering, why those Fulani were clustering. That makes sense to us. Yeah. It makes linguistic sense. It makes geographic sense. It makes cultural sense. Those other arms of historiography that we're supposed to look at when we're making these kind of conclusions, that they don't bother. They just pull out some DNA and then go, oh, nope, they're not related. Nope. 70,000 years. Look, we've proven it using our output. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
The genetic divergence observed in the Takori burials suggests that these people were not a homogeneous group. The Nature article emphasizes that their genomes are not only distinct from present-day sub-Saharan populations, but from modern North African groups as well. This suggests long periods of regional isolation with occasional gene flow across the Sahara. Now, let's take a journey into some speculation regarding the possible appearance of these.
Now, this is where, just on that last point he made, obviously he's just quoting the study at that point, and just like many people, I'm sure a lot of people don't take the level of skepticism towards these studies. But remember, I've always had this skepticism. I've always been this untrusting of these genetic studies. A lot of people don't have that. They think that the genetic studies are telling us something, and then we have to change our worldview to fit the studies. I don't do that. I know their BS. Obviously, look, there's not many things that I'm going to start talking about like I'm an expert in, and I'm not expert here, but I do have a computer science degree. Yeah. And one thing that I know and I'm able to spot straight away is data manipulation. Very easy for me to spot. I'm good when it comes to data and statistics and stuff like that, and being able to say, okay, this easy. There's multiple ways you can get that outcome. So I can look at a source of data and say, okay, well, there's that there, but there's multiple ways you can get to that outcome. And straight away, I was able to spot how genetics were being misused. And I was like, I'm not buying this. And finding that study that I've been going through today was a little bit of a godsend, because it just basically created the framework for almost everything that I've been saying about their biased SMP arrays, but didn't perhaps have the specialist knowledge to be able to put it into words. It's already been done. So the flaws and the fallacies of their approach have already been laid out very, very clearly. They're there. They've already been laid out, So we don't have to look far. The rules that they're breaking have been already discussed, and they don't care. They're going to keep doing it as long as they can get away with it. And each study, they get more inconsistent and worse and worse and worse and worse, as you're seeing.
These ancient North African women. I know we can't resist imagining what these ancient North African women look like. If we were to envision the phenotype of the Takori women based on genetic data, climate adaptation, and other comparative studies, it's likely that they had dark skin, a reasonable assumption given their environment. They may have had features commonly associated today with dark-skinned Saharan and Sahelian peoples. Although the nature study didn't express specific pigmentation genes, considering the timeline and the environmental context, it's doubtful that lighter skin was ubiquitous in these populations.
Let's at this point have a little dive into some further stuff that will either make you laugh or cry about this study. Because yeah, the coping is so real. But since he's talking about complexion, let's just have a nice little dive into the discussion around Neanderthal ancestry since that came up. And this study is just absolutely revolting. Sorry, I'm just so angry reading it. Oh man. So I'm just going to find the page quickly. Even the yeah, let me show you another. I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm going to show you some the admixture clustering as well. Okay, so if the PCA wasn't enough for you, so admixture clustering really is a visual thing, and once again, these are still based on biased SNP arrays. But regardless of that, I'm going to zoom in and show you what the admixture cluster looks like. Once again, this is not mentioned. Yeah, so remember that, guys. Yeah, this is not mentioned on the main study. They don't talk about this. It's just kind of sitting here in the supplementary study. Bear in mind that admixture clustering and PCA was enough for all of their conclusions on Schuneman's study and was utilized to filter in the NeuRat study. In this study, okay, yeah, but we don't care. Let me zoom in so you guys can see. Oh, what happened? No, why did it do that? Why would it do that? I've lost my page. Did I just close it or something? Oh, here it is. Okay, cool. So you guys might just about be able to see this. I'm going to try and zoom in a bit. Oh, I did it again. This is madness. This is just trying to pee me off. Where is? Okay, that's as close as I can get. I can't get any closer. So the Takori, and they deliberately, I'm going to say deliberately right now, because normally the subject, they make the subject wider so you can see it. Yeah, they've deliberately made the subject really slim so you can't see it. And they've put them at the bottom, okay? And they've put Takori right next to all of these Eurasian groups, okay? So you can see right next to all these Eurasian groups. But I want you to look at the pattern, because this is what we're supposed to be looking at when it comes to admixture clustering. So look at the way the colors are set out. So in this first column, yeah, we have pink, a little bit of red, and a light green. Okay, pink, a little bit of red, and a light green. Okay, we can't see it anywhere. We got a little bit of pink here, but that's about it. A little bit of pink here, that's about it. What do we have here? Pink, red, light green. Pink, red, where are we? Fulani. Light green, pink, red. So we can see clear clustering once again with the same groups. Okay, Mandinka, pink, red, light green. There's a clear clustering in that first column. Yeah, can we all see this, guys? Yeah, let's have a look. at the second column, pink, red, light purple. Once again, no correlation to all of these Eurasian groups, who they've stuck it next to. Let's have a look. Pink, red. Well, Fulani's got, has any got the light purple? None of them got the light purple. So light purple is a bit of an outlier. No, light purple's there. Oh, it's all here. Sorry, Fulani's got it. Sorry, pink, red, light purple. Once again, clustering almost identically with the Fulani A and Fulani B. We've got pink and red here with some of the Laka, Mada, Songhai. But either which way, once again, clustering almost directly with the Takori sample. Let's look at the third layer of our admixture clustering. We have pink, red, and a little bit of purple again. Let's look down this third column. Where do we get pink? Oh, once again, pink, red, little bit of purple is, well, a lot of purple here. So we've got pink, red, a lot of purple in Fulani again. Pink, tiny bit of red, a lot of purple. Either which way, once again, we're seeing the same signals amongst the same groups. Let's look at the next one. Pink, red, purple again. No correlation to the Eurasian groups whatsoever. Once again, Fulani, again, we can see pink, red, purple, pink, red, purple. To be honest with you, all of the African groups are clustering quite a bit closer, even up to the Yoruba here, pink and purple. Okay. Guys, I could go through every column. Let's just skip over to the, I'm just skipping over to the last, just to kind of show you the that this doesn't stop anywhere. Let's look at the very last column, sixth column. We have light purple and then blue. Okay. So a lot of light purple, then a little bit of blue. So we have a little bit of a match with this Hazara, whoever this is, and the Algerian. But let's see if we can get a closer match. Fulani, a load of purple, little bit of blue. Load of purple, little bit of blue. Somali, load of purple, little bit of blue. Maasai, load of purple, little bit of blue. Guys, every single vertical, Takori clusters almost identically to these African groups. Okay, this is admixture clustering. Now, this wasn't even considered. They didn't even care to look at this, guys. So we have not only PCA, principal component analysis, we have admixture clustering, all clearly showing that the Takori, but look, let's read this. Let's read what it says here. Unsupervised admixture results. So this is unsupervised admixture results. That's why it's so close to the Africans. We saw that's almost identical, despite how they try to lay it out and put the Eurasians next to it to confuse people who look at this. If we look at the patterning looks identical to the Fulani groups, to the Kenyan groups, identical. Let's have a look here. Unsupervised admixture results of modern and ancient populations displayed for a few informative K values. The optimal K determined by the lowest cross-validation error is K7. The Takori sample, a single sample from a deep ancestry population, was insufficient to model this component as a separate ancestry. I don't know what that means, but it just sounds like to me like, yeah, we did it, but no. I mean, guys, you saw what I just saw there. Yeah, this is not me making this up. Yeah, this is not me making this up. This is an identical match to the exactly this. This is what we're seeing is a consistent clustering of these samples with modern groups of Fulani and Kenyan people, even in their biased Eurocentric SMP arrays. Well, actually, this one isn't, because they said this one was unsupervised. So I think that someone correct me, but I think that might be code word for whole genome, where they haven't run it through the SMP array, which might be the reason why it clusters so close correctly as it should with other Africans. It might be the reason. I could be wrong. Okay, but that's it. So you can see that there. And then whilst we're here, let's just have a quick look at the whole, yeah, we're getting it here. I think we're going to have a look at the Neanderthal ancestry now. Okay, so let's have a look here at what they said here regarding Neanderthal ancestry. Or it might be better to look in the main study, actually. This just talks about how they calculated it. Oh, this is the table I wanted to show you. Okay, so we have a look here, and we look at the Neanderthal ancestry, and it does talk about how they calculated it. Once again, I'm not a geneticist. I'm not going to act like I am, but it does sound rather speculative, and it would be good to have a geneticist to look over that. To me, it did sound rather speculative, the way they even estimated that he had that tiny Neanderthal ancestry. But this chart really helps to put things in perspective. Okay, here's your Germany, Luxembourg, Neanderthal ancestry, Russian, and I think some of these are even showing less. I know they can be up to 4%, but anyway, this is, so they've picked rather low ancestry individuals here. Or so we've got the Germany, okay, well, probably because of the amount of years ago it was, so that's probably why it's showing lower Neanderthal ancestry. But anyway, you can see these individuals here. Then you can see Takori there with 0.15, okay, which is more than, like they said, more than normal Africans, or at least Africans they had in their ancient sample, okay, who all show complete zero, but not enough to write home about. I mean, that's a tiny amount in comparison to 2.36, which is like 15 times more. It's a tiny contribution. It's a tiny contribution. And once again, I still don't trust the way they actually estimated it. Now, remember how they phrased that when we looked at the study. Remember how they phrased that? Oh, he has considerably more. What was the exact word they used? Substantially more than. It's not substantially more. It's a trace amount. 0.15 is a trace amount of Neanderthal ancestry. It's a trace amount. And that's even if these two samples did have Neanderthal ancestry, because I don't trust them, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. So they say detectable Neanderthal ancestry in ancient groups from Africa and Eurasia and present-day sub-Saharan African groups. Error bars represent minimum and maximum estimates from all iterations. Geographic locations of groups included in the analysis. So where's the error bars? We've done it in black, so we can't see the error bar. This is, and look at this. How now, guys, come on. This might be me being stupid, being nitpicky here, yeah. But the error bar, okay, is in black. So this error bar is showing more or less. When they show Takori in black, the error bar only shows us more. It doesn't show us the less, okay. But from what I can see, that more or less looks like it's almost half. So that's you then telling us that this could be down to 0.07. which would almost bring us in line with the modern Mandinka, but we don't know because they've done it in black. Oh, that was a mistake. That was a mistake, wasn't it? They could have done it in red or another color so we can actually see it, but they did it in black so we can't see it. You know, this is my spidey senses going, how do you make a mistake like that in a published study? Because if you look at the lower estimate, then if you look at the error ratio, look how big the error ratio is in comparison to the size of the slice, so to speak, or the size of the bar. If the error ratio goes halfway through this block, you realize that we're looking at trace ancestry in line with modern Africans. And that's the discussion that they do not want to have. Anyway. All right. Yeah, let me close that down. We'll finish watching the video and then we'll wrap it up because this has been going on for way too long.
I mean, combined with the evidence from the so-called Black Mummy also found in southwestern Libya, in addition to the ancient North African rock art throughout the region, it is a reasonable hypothesis that the Takori women were within the range of typical dark-skinned Africans. I think this is an inference to the best explanation for what they may have looked like. But enough with the speculation. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. Given the data and all other variables, what would you consider a reasonable assumption? Regardless, the Takori women offers a glimpse into the cultural lives of these Neolithic Africans. Their graves include ritual objects, stone tools, and evidence of early pastoralism. They were raising livestock in a green Sahara that no longer exists. Their story also reminds us that Africa's past isn't static. Climate change repeatedly reshaped the Sahara. Each transformation left its imprint on the genetics, culture, and movements of people across the continent. The Takori women and their ancient neighbors belong to a lineage of African humanity that was innovative, resilient, and diverse. I imagine the complexity of these findings challenge some assumptions we all have about African history and its people, reminding us that Africa's genetic and cultural past predates the borders, divisions, and ideologies we often subscribe to today. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, support the home team on patreon.com.
Cool. So there you go. Got to the end of that study there. So 2 really good videos by Home Team History that I like. I love the angle that he takes on these. And obviously this angle of me actually, you know, looking through the study, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. Like I said, I'm not a geneticist, so I obviously have to temper very much some of the things that I say, but there are logical fallacies that I can see in terms of conclusions that are being made from data. So just based purely on how data is being communicated, that's where my wheelhouse, I think, is. That's where I'll see. I won't talk about all this kind of like, oh, contamination, this, that, and the other, because I don't know anything about that. It's not my field, but I do know how data can be manipulated and how you can get multiple different answers or outcomes from the same source of data, depending on how you essentially churn it or chew it up. Okay, so that's really it. I hope that's been relatively informative for you guys. I know it was a little bit of a heavy one in terms of the reading and stuff like that, but I think it was probably important for us to just kind of look at their data versus their outcome. Family building warrior said, did you get my super chat? I think I did. Did I not read it out? Apologies if I did. Sorry, I am prone. What's your email? Yeah, I did get that. I read it out already. Let me pop it in the chat. There you go. Oh, that's supposed to say the. That's supposed to say the, not te. I'm not trying to be cool there. It's supposed to say the King Mono Show. Okay. So yeah, I think we'll leave it at that there, guys. This yeah, let's leave it at that, guys. I hope you find it enjoyable. Make sure you hit up the likes before you go. Any last thoughts? If not, I'm going to close and end the live stream because this one's gone on much later than I hoped it would. I did spell it wrong, but I said that. I think you should have heard that. I hope. Just make the correction. It's supposed to say the family building warrior. Okay. Hope you're not listening to this on mute or watching this on mute, I should say. Okay then, guys, I think we'll call it a day then. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a fantastic evening, and I'll see you on the next one, potentially tomorrow. Oh, actually, before I go, I know most of you are logged off already since I said that. Obviously, we'll do a quick check-in on the book sale. It's actually going really well. I say really well. We did have a few people really turn up and show support since yesterday's, or was the day before's live stream when I mentioned about some of those kind of like stretch goals that I've set. So it looks like the community are rising to that challenge. So thank you very much, guys, for that. I much appreciate it. Let me get it on the screen. There it is. Let's see where we are now. Let's have a quick refresh to see where we're at. I actually have no idea where we're at, so this will be interesting for me. There. So yeah, we made a bit of progress since a couple of days ago. So yeah, let's carry on aiming. I'm still at 138 backers. I've still confident for some reason that we can hit that 1,000 backers and I can do that 1,000 books, but let's at least get me to maybe like a point where maybe I can give away 100 books or 250 books. But yeah, if you know anyone who would be interested in backing the project, please feel free to share it, guys. Share it with your communities, get it out there, and let's see what we can do to hit that milestone. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for joining me, for being so fantastic. Thank you, Surfactant, for your donation. It's a great stream. Hit the like button and consider donating to the Kickstarter. Absolutely. I second that. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, B Campbell just made me laugh about the spelling error, people taking it as gospel. Well, I can't help that. It's not my fault. Anyway, guys, have a good one. See you later. Take care. Bye.